It's going to be a hard one to get through this video, which is for the 18th of December 2017. The title of it is Anna Died and Mr. Ron Cried. Perhaps the most heartbreaking book I ever read was Mr. God, This Is Anna, a book by Sydney Hopkins under the pen name Fynn, describing the adventures of Anna, a battered and bruised and very wise 4-year-old whom Fynn found as a runaway in the early 1940s. I read it decades ago, but had forgotten some of the details. She was not yet 8 years old and had climbed a tree to rescue a kitten she saw as frightened. She fell from the tree and her little body was pierced by a fragment of metal on the ground. Fynn told her not to be frightened, and she replied, quote, "Ain't frightened, Fynn. It's like turning inside out," end quote, she said with a look of amazement on her face. She told Fynn she loved him and added, quote, "I bet Mr. God lets me get into heaven for this," end quote. I have read these words several times in the past few days, and every time I cry again. I can't help it. I want so much for Mr. God to do something that will fix the world and heal the insanity. For those who still don't get it, that has been my lifelong mission. My heart is still tender, and reading this heartbreaking story only rekindles my desire for peace on earth. I'm reading now from the back of the book. Anna's story is true. She was only 4 years old when Fynn found her on London's fog-shrouded docks and took her back to his mother's home. And from that first moment, their times together were filled with delight and discovery. Anna had an astonishing ability to ask and answer life's greatest questions, or largest questions. Her total openness and honesty amazed all who knew her. She seemed to understand with uncanny certainty the purpose of being, the essence of feeling, the meaning of love. You see, Anna had a very special friendship with Mr. God. I wish humanity could have a very special friendship with Mr. God. I don't know what Mr. God is, and I have searched it throughout my life on my own spiritual journey and spiritual quest. I grew up believing that the Bible was the Word of God, and I used to read it again and again. Just let him be. And it wasn't till later in my life that I realized, how could this be God speaking when he commanded to kill the little children, the suckling babes and the mothers, and let not your eye pity, but to kill all of them? And I wonder why I didn't see that that couldn't have been the real God. Certainly not the one that we know as God is love. Because that attitude is not love or loving. It is the opposite of that. And yet our religions have been infiltrated by such nonsense. Now, don't get me wrong. And if you've listened to my other videos, you understand that I'm not saying that everything in the Old Testament is bad. Some of the Psalms are wonderful, and many parts of the Old Testament are absolutely wonderful. But they're mixed with a bunch of stuff that's not wonderful at all. It's horrendous. that these things were encouraged by someone posing as the creator, someone with a malevolent intent. And we see a world in which our leaders, for the most part, seem to have a malevolent intent. Their hearts are so hardened, and they lack empathy, as I've said in many other videos. And yet these are the people that claim to be our rulers. We don't need rulers except to measure distances on paper. That's what a ruler is for. It's not someone to dictate to us how to live our lives. Anna knew inside of herself as a little child that life was supposed to be about love. I don't know what her situation was. It doesn't go into that in the book at all. What she ran away from. It said she was a runaway. I don't know if her parents had been killed, which I used to think was the case, that her parents had been somehow killed. But the war hadn't even yet broke out in fullness. It was just breaking out at the time that this story was written. Well, not when it was written, but when the events that were being written about were told. The war was just beginning to break out in London. And of course, the setting is the city of London. And it was the poor part of town, but it was also the loving part of town. Unlike the royalty that had no compassion, this was a home. Fynn's home was one where they took in stray people and stray animals. It was that kind of place. I'm not an animal person as far as bringing them into the same dwelling with me. That's just not the way I was raised. And I don't know if I have really no desire to change it. However, I do have a desire to change the world. I want to make a difference. That's why I've made videos every day for now nearly 7 full years. I've held that vision of peace on earth and a kingdom of heaven that is ruled by sanity, the sanity of not ruling at all, but allowing, not allowing evil people to rule, but allowing all of us to learn about life, as Anna was so inquisitive and so willing to learn and explore. And write it big, she'd say, write it big. We need to write it big, that our mission is to love one another. If we fail in that mission, we have failed in our lives. No matter how much money we've made, no matter how much success we seem to have achieved, or notoriety, whatever, none of those things matter if we don't learn the secret and the key of loving. And we need to get beyond the brainwashing that we are less than. No, we are all more than what we have been told, not less than what we've been told. We all have the capability of becoming gods and goddesses in a physical body, on a physical planet, and it's not some other dimension. I had the thought, I wonder if I'm Anna reincarnated, and that's why it brings so much joy and pain to me. And I don't think that that's the case, but it has crossed my mind. Do you cry when you see what's going on the planet? Or has your heart become too hard to feel that emotion. Think about these things, and thank you for listening. Namaste.